Can you talk with us about who he is, what he's been doing, and why we should be so concerned?
Yeah, so there's been this kind of this weird phenomenon, which maybe is not all that weird actually, but basically ever since Trump came back into power, and ICE has, intensified its immigration raids, they have often partnered with MAGA influencers to create propaganda. And there's been a lot of examples of this, but the people that they're giving repeated access to, exclusive access to, are these kind of MAGA loyalists who they can count on to push whatever narrative that ICE wants and that the Trump administration wants. And that's how I kind of came across Ben Burkwam, who is part of the Real America's Voice network with, I think most people would know through Steve Bannon and the War Room podcast. And, he kind of was this MAGA stunt artist that came up doing these stunts for social media. He stormed the governor's mansion in California with Laura Loomer to some anti-immigrant stunt. He dressed up as a racist caricature of a Mexican that he called Pancho Benny, I think. He was part of anti-lockdown measures and anti-vax movement stuff. He stormed the house of the city council president in Fresno, California over lockdown measures. He was with Marjorie Taylor Greene before she got elected to Congress when they kind of stormed AOC and Ilhan Omar's office on the Hill. And, over this time, he becomes this big MAGA influencer. Steve Bannon takes a liking to him. And he's producing a lot of propaganda at the border with sympathetic sheriffs and border agents who are all pushing this narrative of an invasion at the border and being abandoned by the Biden administration. And then, when Trump gets back into power, he suddenly is doing a lot of ride-alongs with ICE, where he is in the vehicle with ICE agents in the ICE vehicle, recording, getting a front row seat to immigration raids, to immigrants being detained. And, he blurs out the agents' faces, but keeps the immigrants' faces very much in focus. And those faces are often distraught and, sad. They're being ripped away from their families. And, the narrative that Burkwam is pushing in all of these videos that he makes is that ICE is going after criminals and that immigrants are just kind of as a monolith criminals. And, the interesting thing about Burkwam is that when you look at who he associates with and who's he's making this propaganda with, they're all criminals themselves. They all have history of violent arrests. Burkwam himself he'd been arrested for allegedly assaulting a Telemundo cameraman at the border. That charge was he was convicted and then was overturned on appeal. One of the consistent narratives that Burkwam likes to push with his propaganda is that illegal immigrants are dangerous drivers, that they import third world driving habits to the U.S. and that it puts lives in danger. Ben Burkwam in 2010 failed to yield at an intersection in California. He was carrying a trailer on his truck with political signs for a local Republican candidate. He failed to yield at an intersection, turned into traffic, and killed a 57-year-old motorcyclist. There was a lawsuit, a wrongful death lawsuit that was kind of resolved, settled out of court. It looks like there was maybe an insurance payment to the family. But it just goes to show that how shameless these people are they are essentially trying to convince MAGA people that certain subgroups of people are uniformly dangerous and criminals, and that they kill people, when of course they are all guilty of these transgressions themselves. It's kind of like all projection. And it is, I've been thinking a lot about it, and it's like, it's not hypocrisy necessarily. It is actually a very consistent ideology, which is that for the in-group, for MAGA, the law does not apply.
Right.
For everyone in the out-group, it's, the law, binds them, and we can do whatever we want to them. And I think that's kind of what doing this story brought into focus for me. But that's all to say, Burkwam has done dozens of these ride-alongs with ICE and produced reliably, pro-ICE propaganda. He he calls himself a journalist, but he wears an ICE hat. He says God bless ICE. It should be an insult to actual journalists who do their job. It should be infuriating for people to see that. And he, but the reason I think that ICE partners with influencers like this is not only because they know they're going to get sympathetic coverage, but in a way it kind of outsources propaganda for them. And it, because Burkwam is ostensibly independent and is not working for the government, it allows them this veneer of transparency that they are giving access to their operations. And Burkwam in return gets really dramatic footage of these immigration raids that he can make into viral propaganda that will ultimately get him more followers, get him more money, get him more success, make him a bigger name. So it's kind of like a mutually beneficial relationship for a fascist project.